we start this live every week like that. We never decide who's going to say what at the beginning. Anyway, welcome. We are happy to be able to share in this way. We weren't sure we were going to share tonight because the electricity
left us a little bit there
left
tonight.
us for
Quite a
30
few
minutes. 30, 45 minutes. Anyway, it's back, and by the grace of God, it will stay.
Yes.
So we see a few people are on already, and we say good night to you.
Yes, good night.
And,
welcome. Just trying to fix my
Hope that
wardrobe.
you enjoy this discussion that we will have. Yeah, Billy, go ahead.
So good night, everybody, and like was said already, welcome to Muddy Puddles, June 2021. We've been here over a year now.
June 21st.
2021, the 21st, right? And we are so glad that we were able to stop by again. Tonight we're going to be discussing a very important, we always say that, right? But a very important topic. And good night, Earlene. Welcome. You know, we have to shout you guys out when you come on.
We don't see everybody who comes on.
Yeah, but when we see you, we're going to shout you out. Thank you for being with us. Good night. Good night. Tonight, I'm just going to tell you, tonight we're going to be talking about daddyless girls, daddyless daughters, and how fatherlessness shows up in your romantic relationships, what it does, how it impacts it. Good night, Rodney. Welcome. It's so good to see you on with us. Hey, Marcia. Welcome. We hope you guys
missed
are doing
Marcia
well.
a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's nice to see you back. And so we want to look at that aspect, that issue, and to help somebody tonight. We thought about doing everybody together, like boys, and when I say boys, you know, we're talking about male and female, but we thought, let's just do one. We may be able to slip in a few things here and there of the other sex, but definitely we're going to be looking at the impact on women. And this came up because, you know, yesterday was Father's Day. So let me just say one time, happy Father's Day to all the men who join us. And there's all the men who will end up watching us. Good night and happy Father's Day to you. We hope you had a wonderful day yesterday. Good night, Gloria. Good night, Sia. Welcome. And we just want to celebrate you. Good night, Francis. Welcome. We want to celebrate you. Jerry, you're on. You know, we're going to tangle tonight. It's so nice to see you. We hope you had a good Father's Day yesterday. I saw your message on Facebook. I think I responded. But having Father's Day yesterday made us really come to think about that a little bit more. That impact issue of not having a dad and how that filters into our relationships. And sometimes we wonder why some women pick some men, and why they ignore some others, or why they do some things in the relationship. And the studies show, the Bible shows, and the scientific studies show that many times it comes from how they experience men in their developmental years. All right. So we want to look at that tonight. So as usual, please share the live. Start a watch party. Call your friend and say, hey, log into this one here. Definitely want to hear from you. So we're going to be asking questions. We want you to ask questions. We want you to share your experiences without, as comfortable as you feel to share them. Good night, Candice. Welcome. But we want to really help somebody tonight, because you don't have to have a relationship that looks like what you didn't have when you were growing up. All right. So definitely welcome. And go ahead.
Wonderful.
Drink some water. Good night, Yvette. Sister Yvette, welcome. Hope you're doing well. Ready?
Yes, go ahead. You can.
All right. So, well, I mean, let's just start. We have 22 persons on. So thank you guys for sticking with us. And again, like I said, we want to hear from you. So one of the first things we want to establish tonight is that daddylessness, or father absenteeism, or whatever we call it, is a common situation, and it is worldwide. So we do know that there tends to be a higher level of it in persons like us, I won't say African Americans, but in America, African Americans.
Although they're not very sure about that,
Yes, when the Caribbean is a big issue, we know the studies are showing. Yes,
well, it will be in the Caribbean.
We do know that what the statistics show, at least in the US, is that at least 1 in 4, and I want to believe that is replicated here too in the Caribbean. About 1 in 4 child or children, 1 in 4 children will grow up without a father. And so let's hold that in our minds, that fatherlessness is a real phenomenon. Good night, Danielle. Welcome. It's a real phenomenon. And so let's get this clear now. The reality is that girls who grow up without a father, or women who have grown up without a father, grow differently. There's no way around it. And you could bring your arguments, that's fine. We're gonna hear you guys out and we want to hear from you. But that has been shown across the board. Every cultural place that has been shown.
There's some kind of impact.
There is an impact, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, is that it affects boys too. But like we said, tonight we're going to be looking at the girls especially. Good night, Luther. Welcome. And good night, Claudius. Welcome, welcome. We see you coming in. So let's look at how, you want to go to that one, Erin, how fatherlessness occurs. And just to make the point, it doesn't matter how the fatherlessness occurred. It just matters that it did happen. So some of the things that lead to fatherlessness.
Yeah. Death. Unfortunately, some persons lost their father at an early age. You couldn't do anything about that.
Yeah.
That's really tough. And some of them may even say unfair, and I would totally understand. Not ever knowing your father. Father's probably around. People say this is your father, but there's no acceptance of it or confirmation of the same. Parental separation, marriage, there's a divorce, there's a separation, and there is loss. And by the way, people think grief comes from just loss of a loved one, death, but you can have grief from loss of anything that is important to you or special to you. And so in a case like that, the relationship, the father could still be around, but they probably will be around in a different way. Yes. Imprisonment, some have had to deal with this. By the way, this is also this has also become a present issue. For some have lost loved ones through COVID, lost a father. In this case, we said we will talk about the mother another time, but some have lost their fathers because of COVID.
So we're gonna see things,
and that's even more complicated in terms of the complicated loss. Migration. Some have gone to other places for different reasons. They want to earn a living or provide for their families in a better way. So people have lost fathers in different ways. A question is there.
There's a question, but let me, before we go to that, and there's also the father who is physically present, but mentally, emotionally absent. And so it's just as if the father is not even there present, physically. Right?
So we want you to know this. And doesn't mean it's going to always have a negative impact on your relationships, but when fathers are not as present as they should, some of them for different reasons, and many of you have probably good explanations why the father was not there or what have you. Some women have kept fathers away for different reasons. We're not going to judge you as it relates to that, because sometimes it's a good reason why they're not around. But what we know is that there's an impact. So you have to know that. There's an impact on them. But we're talking about relationships. We know there is going to be an impact some way in the relationship. And we're going to talk further about that. So there's a question here. Is this just father not present in the home, or no fatherly interactions in terms of the statistics?
Right. It speaks primarily to the total absence, but it does take into consideration as well those, like I said, emotionally absent. So we have emotional absenteeism as well, right? So it does primarily speak to just not having a father. And let me tell you, having a father show up once a year can still count as fatherlessness, or seasonally once a season still counts as fatherlessness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So don't take it lightly. Again, we have men who are fathers who are present in the home but emotionally absent. There's no interaction.
And you have
no
those who are
bonding
not
with
in
the
the
children.
home. There are those who are not in the home but very present in their
And that
lives.
doesn't count for it at all. All right, there is a level of missing that goes on, but the interactions, especially when there's good co-parenting, when the child hears from the dad
time,
every day,
quality time,
right, that covers it all, right? So remember, we're not talking about children, but we want to lay the foundation tonight, right? That was a good question. All right, and I want to add this quickly as well. So while we're talking about the fatherlessness, good night, Suan and Salisa,
Onika
welcome.
and Siobhan.
Yes, while we're talking about the fatherlessness, there are some things that can kind of buffer that girl as she's growing up, and ultimately that woman that we're going to get into, from the absence of the father. And generally, what happens is that a male figure steps in and performs that role in a healthy, loving way.
Yeah.
And so you may say, well, I never daddy. But a lot of them had a grandfather. Some of them had an uncle or two. They had a church leader, pastor, somebody in the church. They had a neighbor, a cousin, some male figure, a coach, a counselor, somebody who stood in the gap and in a healthy way fathered them. Right. So they were able to see the example of men in a positive way in their lives.
And then, I'm thinking, boy, it complicates the whole fatherlessness situation when the person who is the father figure interacts in an unhealthy way. Yes. So that makes it even worse in a sense.
And I was trying to avoid that for now, but since he mentioned it, definitely we're not talking about those who come in and wreak havoc through abuse and mistreatment and those kind of things. I'm talking about men who step in a healthy way. I heard a girl's story the other day. She didn't have a dad. Her mother was raising her. She now has a ministry. She was big on Facebook. And she said it was a man who, her teacher, she was so bright in school, and a teacher introduced her to this man. It was a man who had, means, and he paid for her throughout her school life, from primary school right up to her secondary, tertiary education. That was a man who stepped in. She came from a fatherless home, but now she's living with a healthy, from what we're seeing and what she's sharing, a healthy, loving marital relationship. Because that man stepped in. Maybe he was not there all the time, but just calling to say, how are you doing? I'm going to buy the uniforms. I'm going to buy the books. That provided a buffer. So I want you to know that even if you didn't have a father for whatever reason, when you never knew him, your mother didn't know him, your dad
but
died,
you probably had a father figure that helped you.
It did.
But what we're talking about is the impact this can have on your relationship. Yes. And some of the impacts you're having, and men need to listen to this, sometimes the way the woman is interacting or operating or what have you, not because they're wicked or anything like that, or how you get to marry this witch or whatever you might say. It's because they have some life experiences. We have spoken before that your upbringing really impacts your marriage. Yes. So you have to pay attention to this. Yes? And we're going to talk about some ways in which
it affects. But
before you go there,
let me just talk about, so I am one of those who actually had a fatherless experience, and it was quite a unique one. So I'm just sharing a little bit. Don't worry, I'm not going to the whole story. But I grew up with my father, knew him to be very interactive, at least with me, until I was about 8, 9. And then he disappeared. And that was the actual truth for me. It was a disappearance because our family was accustomed to traveling. We were accustomed to see daddy travel and come back. He used to always go to the US and do business and stuff like that. And so you always knew that one day, because he wasn't the kind of like, oh, I'm coming back. He was always like a get up and go. He come back, he went away. And then one day he traveled, and then the trip just took longer. He went into years, and eventually I realized, wait, I think he gone. It took me years to figure that out. And so a lot of the things that happen, and you see there are 3 impacts that we have of fatherlessness. You have it on the mother who's left with the children. There's a severe impact on her. And the impact on the mother and how she ultimately parents affects the child and how they eventually love in their adult relationships. There's also an impact on the child or the children who are left, and definitely the environment suffers as a result. And so one of the things I remember experiencing, and I always wonder if this had any link with it, is I developed very quickly, very early in life. So I was an early boomer, or whatever you call them. And I had to take on responsibilities early. So just the other day, I was talking to a friend and I was laughing about it because now it's just like funny. I remember in secondary school, all my friends were saying, "You want to go downtown to Lime?" I could hardly Lime because after school, I had to go home and cook. I'm talking about like first, second, third form, right? I had to go back cook. And there was no way, because if I came home and cook, if I didn't come home and cook, they would say how wicked I am because your mommy has to leave one job to go to another job to go to another job just to make sure you can be in school. So as a 13, 14-year-old girl, I had to master the kitchen. I had to come home from school, take off my uniform. So I didn't get a Lime. First school bus out, back in Bethesda. You start to cook that food. You have to figure out what to cook. It's not like they left a list. So I had to develop those skills. I had to wash. I remember I was washing from about 10, like literally. Don't feel sorry for me, all right? Don't worry, it was an abuse. And them time we didn't have a machine. We got a machine when I was in university. So it's not like I had a machine. I had to wash with my hand. So you had these 3, 4 baths around you. One with the first wash, one with the second wash, and the fabric softener. And you wash it, everybody goes. And I remember that happening after Daddy left. Now maybe I may have been too young before, but distinctly I know that happened after. And so it is a common experience. So we wanted to share, if you have experienced daddylessness in your life and you are able to just say yes, and this always impacted me, we want to hear from you tonight. Okay, so what else?
Because you may not even know that the fact that daddy wasn't around caused you to have particular views of the male figure.
Yes.
It may
Excuse me one
be
minute.
shaping how you interact with your spouse. It may even shape how you interact in other ways. So we're going to talk about the impact of fatherlessness at a glance. So we just touch on this impact on childhood and what have you, and then go to the impact as an adult.
Yeah. So generally, a child, a woman, let's do the woman, a woman who grows up without a father, and because of how they interpret it, and especially if they are based on how the father left, they tend to battle with self-esteem issues, body image and self-esteem issues. So as
and you can do that with a father around too.
Yes, but it's specific. It's very common when they're not around. And we're going to explain why. So if you have gone through and you know any of these things, you can just say, "Hey, yeah, I know, I've heard that, I've seen it, I've lived that," right? And so many times they live with a feeling of unworthiness, like I don't deserve that. One of the reasons is that, especially based on how early the father left, the age of the child, they tend to feel that they caused it. So there's often the belief that I did something wrong. I was rude. I didn't do something right, and so daddy left, right? And so they tend to feel, well, I am unworthy.
It could also be that they just didn't get the affirmation from their daddy.
Right.
That you're beautiful, you know, you're good enough, that kind of thing.
That word enough is a big word. Trust me, that comes into relationships later. We're going to come to that, right? You want to go low quality of life standard. And this feeds into the
because
esteem.
that check is not there, that you know, that those resources are not there. And so that can affect them too.
Yes, definitely. Because we talk about the impact on the mother and the socioeconomic impact, and also
because there are things you couldn't get when you were growing up.
Oh yeah, and I remember that's a distinct change. Because I remember when Daddy was around, we used to shop big. I remember we had a certain diet, we had a certain lifestyle. We used to eat out a lot. We used to travel. Almost every year we used to go to the States, and then all of a sudden it just changed. And I remember because growing up we couldn't even drink Kool-Aid. My mother was very distinct, so we used to drink Lucasade. When we used to buy the big bottle of Lucasade, we used to drink Ribena, and our local drinks. And then because we thought we shouldn't drink Kool-Aid. And then things got so bad. We were buying like you remember when Kool-Aid was 60 cents? We used to have to buy 60 cents packet of Kool-Aid to mix juice if there was nothing in season. And I now saying it and thinking about it, I think my mother really felt it, but we didn't notice it because I was still young. My older, because I'm the last, maybe my sister, because my brother left right after my father. So even that affected me. But there was a sharp decline in our quality of life. I didn't travel for quite a number of years, or if I
After
did, for yeah, it. Well, I used to go with mommy because she always traveled for church, but traveling changed, and definitely things changed. We stayed in the same school, and I will share this openly. I never finished primary school. I didn't go to junior five. Well, I went to junior five, but that's because daddy left. And what happened is that after a while, mommy couldn't afford the school fee because we were all private school trained. We went to private school, all of us. And my mother said she will not allow us to go to any other school because she believed in the private school system. But one day when things got really bad, she sat me down and she said, Billy, I cannot afford the school fee anymore. Your father's not sending the money for the school fee. You're going to have to take your exam. And I was like 10. And I had to know shift. She said she spoke to my teacher, and my teacher said, well, she's already a good student, so it's not anything to worry, but let her come by me certain afternoons after school and I'll prepare her. And so I used to go to my junior 4 teacher every so often after school to be prepared, and I took my exam. I remember going to T and Kernan. Never went to junior 5. Well, actually, like I said, I did because I didn't pass for high school, just sharing that. And my mother was indignant. You must go to high school. And so she sent me back to Sunnyside because I went to Sunnyside. I'm a proud product of Sunnyside Tutorial School. And very good school back then. And the teacher had to say to her, mommy, I remember that conversation. She said, mommy, Billy passed the exam. She didn't pass, but for high school as you wanted, but she passed. And so it's very unfair to bring her back into primary school when she was supposed to be in secondary school. But one thing, I'm just sharing this quickly. One thing I always remember is that I missed the friendships that I had because I left all my friends in junior 4 and went to secondary school in a school and environment and people I didn't know at all. I didn't know anybody in that school.
But it affected your quality of life.
It affected it, definitely.
The other thing is the loss of the sense of security. Yeah. I didn't have a perfect father. And our relationship wasn't very close. It's much better now. But I always felt safe when he was home.
Yeah.
The relationship wasn't always good, but I know any thief, any jumbi, any hurricane,
yes.
daddy was there. That doesn't mean mommy wasn't strong, but daddy,
yeah,
I felt secure. I have a feeling as a female, you would also feel that sense too.
And we're talking about things that lead into relationships. Don't think we're off track.
We're coming there,
right? We're laying the foundation.
So, and then reduce mental and physical well-being. Billy explained some of that.
So a lot of them have anxiety, a lot of them have depression or any other mood disorder. Definitely one.
Right, and that doesn't always have to be the case. We're just saying what the possibilities are. My 2 girls went to Sunnyside.
Hey, nice.
Hey, you Sunnyside people, give us a
I
chance.
almost said something like, Billy, hold it down.
Yes,
down.
that's what it is. Also. Increased level of.
Was my principal.
Increased level of anger.
Yes.
That's a possibility also. We're not saying everybody follows everything here in a linear way, but it just happens that some of these things can happen. Facing emotional challenges in intimate relationships. I think I saw earlier someone said always trying to please others, eager to please others, not knowing how to properly establish boundaries with the opposite sex.
Thank you.
And I think that leads into premature sexual activity and teenage pregnancy. Likely to get married in the teenage phase. I didn't know that.
Not only married, because we know we're getting married later, but they actually start to commit. So they begin to feel, I can handle a committed relationship earlier.
Right.
And so that becomes like a common law kind of thing. Okay, so what happens now? Let's fast forward some years now. We're all grown up. We're women. We're men. And what one marriage and family therapist said is that women and men, but we're talking about women primarily tonight, who grew up with the fatherless syndrome, they call it a daddyless syndrome, they tend to have what is called a father wound. So you don't have to put it up, but if you do, we will appreciate it. Look at yourself for some maybe you've seen something and see if you can identify that father wound. What is that father wound? That is, go ahead. You want to go ahead?
I was going to say, anybody, if you're willing to share, you can share. Tell us, how, if that were the case. There's some person on here, I know you were blessed to have both mother and father around. And by the way, I'm not saying the single parent situation is you're not blessed also.
Yes.
We're just saying that in a case where the father is not there, how did you feel? You know, do you feel it affected you? Do you feel it affected your relationship? She said, Marcia said, explain the father wound.
Right. So the father wound is the void that is left, or the pain. So it can be two: the void, the emptiness, and the pain that is left from the father who is not present and active in the person's life.
Although there are people who would say, I didn't feel like I was wounded or anything like that. My mommy and a single parent situation was excellent.
Yes.
I didn't have a problem.
And most times, like you said, they had the buffer because their mommy made sure they had somebody around
else
who was fulfilling that role. So you have that father wound that you grow up with, and the wound doesn't close unless you actively work towards healing it. So fast forward a few years, you're starting to have relationships, or you're in marriage now, and you realize some issues come up. So what are some of the main issues that we have found and the studies have found coming up in relationships where there are father wounds unhealed or open father wounds? One of the biggest thing is that there tends to be an issue with trust. With trust, and somebody mentioned it as well. With trust, there's also the issue of boundaries. We're looking for the notes here. With boundaries, and there's also the issue of esteem and worth, right? So generally, distrust of men. So that's a trust issue. Yes. So somebody's saying, I feel bad, right? Poor communication. So what the
No, she's saying, I feel bad.
Right, yeah, I saw that.
Right. So
yes.
No, she's saying she feels bad.
Oh,
for sure, she felt bad from that.
Explain it for us.
Oh no, I think she's saying she felt bad about daddy not being
around. Okay.
Well, you can clarify
for us. Yes. So generally there is a mistrust, and here's what happens in the developmental years, in the young years. The father acts as that pillar of security and safety, and when they are involved, they tend to have that feeling of completeness in the general form, once he's not an abusive father, right? But when the father is not present and they grow into adulthood, they begin to feel that the possibility of security cannot be found in a man, because when they were developing and learning about trust, there was not a man to teach them what trust was about. Right? So we have those issues with trust. So they can go to one or two ways. They can become overly dependent, which is like, too much trust, if you want to say it like that. Or they can go to the other side where they are very rigid and they do not trust men. And it's strange because they don't trust men, but they're constantly in relationships.
Right. Because you're trying to fill this void. One person explained, as you said, is a wound. This is not the same for everybody. We're just trying to explain to you what happens with young women sometimes.
Yes.
And those same young women will get married. What happens is that one person said it's almost like self-harm.
Yeah.
Where you cut yourself, but in a sense is a sexual thing.
Yes.
Right? That manifests itself in relationships and could manifest itself later on
in the marriages. So you have that coming
right.
up.
And Marcia giving us all the thing there.
Yes.
Distrust of men. Yes. You have poor communication.
Yes.
At least I'll say this. Because you're not used to communicating with a man, when the man is in the house and always in the house, that could become an issue.
Yes.
What do you think? So you're not used to having a man around like that. So you don't know. I'm not saying all men are like that. But, some men behave particular ways and do certain things. And
I struggled with that. I didn't have a man in my house from the time I was 8. And when my father was around, he wasn't so constant. But when he was there, he was there. So certain things. So the first time a man came into my bathroom and left the toilet seat up, I had a fit. I'm like, what kind of food? People actually, my response was like, people actually do this kind of stuff? It doesn't make any sense.
That's not all men, eh? Some men do that very well.
True. But I'm saying...
Luan is saying strange thing is that you can have an absent father and who is physically present in the home.
Yes,
Right. We mentioned that
yes,
earlier.
definitely.
That the father could be absent, but there's still such a deep relationship
Yes.
and connection. So we know that. So
Yes.
there are persons who weren't raised with a father, but your father was always with you. Such a person is not going to likely have the feeling of that
not
absence.
as great as, definitely not.
Right.
So here's another thing that happens. So we talk about the mistrust. There are also issues with perfectionism and trying to do. So what happens is that, especially remember I mentioned children feeling that they are to blame, especially the girls, that they are to blame for daddy leaving. They tend to grow up thinking they have to be perfect, and there's nothing called perfection. I was kind of perfectionistic too. Have to be perfect for this partner that they're now with to love them and fully accept them. So they will cut their nose off, how we say it, to fit, whatever the quote says, goes, because they are now thinking, if I am not this relationship wouldn't work. They don't understand how to let a relationship naturally grow and blossom and go through the stages, the ebbs and flows, the highs and lows.
Right.
And so there's that issue. If my husband looks displeased, I internalize that and depression comes on. So you have a situation where the husband saying, oh, it don't matter. And they're totally wounded. How can it not matter? That means I don't matter. Right. Cut your nose off to spoil the face. Yes, thank you. So go ahead.
And you were saying there, so I was going to say, as you were talking, no, some women avoided some of these things because there was somebody who was a male figure, or they found a way to deal with it otherwise.
Yes.
And we'll get into it. How
Yes.
do you deal with these wounds?
Right.
I was also thinking, Billy, I wonder if I should say this now. What if you had a wonderful father present in the home, etc., etc.? Could there be an issue where you get married now and the man you married, the husband, the daddy up there,
he's a step down. Just say it. Just say it. Don't go all them
and the
technical.
husband somewhere
He's a step
a little
down.
lower?
I have seen it a lot, and it has often puzzled me. But one of the things that happens is that when women grow up with these secure attachments, because what we're looking at is attachment styles, they tend to develop the secure attachment, especially the fathers. Sometimes what happens is the fathers didn't give them the proper boundaries, but it was just love, it was good love. So what they feel now is that they can free fall into anything, and they will catch them like daddy caught them. And so they begin to know, it could go either way. They're trying to find something different and exciting, but feel that they will still get the basic qualities like daddy in this person. Or they may generally just, become so trusting that they don't allow wisdom to prevail. And so oftentimes they say, well, he's so much like daddy because he cooks and he always helps with so and so. And when he comes by mommy, he does this. And
Why
he's
change your voice?
like, I'm going to talk. He's like daddy. And then the red flags are there, but they're just saying, this is like my dad, and he makes me feel how daddy used to make me feel, so precious and loved. Although the red flags are there, just kind of below the surface. Yeah. Okay. So we want to hear from you.
And of
guys.
course,
Go
that
ahead.
comparison with daddy can really bother the husband.
It doesn't come
Even
as much as with the women and the mother, the men, the mothers.
Okay.
But generally, it can if they are, if it becomes a kind of unhealthy relationship. Yeah. But let's turn it to the other side. One of the things that often happens on the negative side of that is that women who
So that's
grow without
one of the other issues.
yes, who grow without fathers tend to pursue in men qualities that they think would fill the void that their father has left, and they often pick traits.
Right, or opposite to what the father that they have didn't have. Right.
So
he wasn't a good father. He was very absent or what have you.
That's the positive of it.
Right.
Right. But the negative is that they end up picking traits that resemble their father.
Right.
So you had a father who showed up on occasion. Especially if, hear this out, so mothers be careful. Especially if you had a mother or somebody around you trying to justify the father's irresponsible behavior. Your daddy loves you, just that he just can't come. He called and say he come in 7 o'clock. He don't come until 7 days later. You didn't know it was 7 days, 7 o'clock. And so you begin to think this inconsistency is okay. And you go and you pick up these qualities in the father, and you're thinking, like I was saying the other day, what your soul needs is what irks you the most in your relationships. You start looking for these things, not knowing what you're doing. Trying to do is fill the void and heal yourself, or try to recapture that. Sometimes they're trying to recapture it so they can fix it. Maybe if I get him, I could do for him what I couldn't do when daddy was around. All right? So we're in the relationship now. This is what's happening in the relationship. And so many times the women are trying to be who they're not, just trying to do things to keep the spouse. They're living in a lot of mistrust and uncertainty. Poor communication.
Because you just don't know what it is to communicate.
Yes, you don't, right?
With a male figure. You were raised with all women. Well, likely could be all women, but you could have a brother or what have you. But in some cases, you don't know what it is to really
connect with a male.
Right. So
yeah,
so you're married now, and you're going through all of this, and you're thinking, this, I made a mistake with the woman. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten married. What do you do? You know.
It's about, well, let me read this and we'll get to that, what you will do. So one writer said, I think this is Focus on the Family, and I love their platform. So many times they are scared of life. That is the woman. They are scared of life because they are unable to form any meaningful relationships. Those are the women who have daddyless issues, right? And so they tend to find sexual gratification in the image of their father, which sometimes mirrors their partner. So like I just said, they go around unconsciously looking for men who look like their dads. And when I say look like, I don't mean physically. We're talking about how they operate, their mindsets. And sometimes you just don't understand this is what they're doing because they're trying to get daddy back in their life. They're trying to be fathered. And so when a fatherless daughter comes into a relationship, listen to what they said, they cannot form a good relationship because they do not know how to react. They don't know how to react to the male. Right? And so they would react the same way as they would have received, if they have received, let me just read that again. They would reflect the same way as they would have received, but they didn't get the loving treatment. How would they react? So, in other words, they will begin to treat or operate in their marriages the same way they would behave in their father-daughter relationship. But because that father-daughter relationship was absent, they don't know how to operate. And so what happens? They try to get an understanding of what it means to be a spouse from other means that many times reflect in a negative manner. Gender, what we call it, feminism has done that in some way, has said to the woman, well, this is how you ought to be, and the man is whatever they say. I don't know, because I'm not a feminist, and I'm not a feminist, full stop. But they try to find the ways, their identity, their ways of interacting from some of these external sources that are coming up. And so growing up without a father creates an emptiness which is reflected in their relationship too. Again, this is not everybody, but many people, all right? So remember that father wound, that creates that emptiness. And unless that father wound is healed, they often continue to operate like that. They tend to judge, get anxious and depressed about their relationship. So sometimes the simplest things that just could be ebbs and flows of the relationship could become catastrophic or traumatic for them.
Yeah. And when you feel like so what should have been an easy discussion, what should have been just a disagreement, could have been even intense, may give the woman a feeling like the man is running again, or the man is going to leave again. And so what eventually happens is that you just avoid any kind of discussion that might be intense, because you don't want to feel like this could actually end. This man could actually go out on me again.
So there's always that fear of, if I don't do what I think, and often the perceptions are so warped, you think that they're gonna leave.
Right.
Go ahead.
Sister Otley has here, good night. If your father say I was bringing something for you, but the air hostess took it and was not true. Yeah.
So the lies.
The lies, yeah.
Yes.
That can have an impact. Yeah.
And the woman begin to think that this is actually normal.
Yeah. That's mistrust, eh? Mistrust. And if not properly dealt with, they will carry that mistrust for the opposite sex. For the man. Yeah?
So let's go ahead. You want to say something else? Because we're going to go to somewhat
ahead.
about the father wound. So how does the father wound affect or show up in the adult life? So let me just read. So in my adult life, it was difficult to engage. So generally, they are clingy, very fearful, and we just said that, fearful that they would lose the relationship, and they will get very demanding if I don't get the love that I thought I needed or deserved, and then I would push the person away. When we talked about anger, sometimes, in addition to other issues, there's so much anger that is inside that father wound in that woman that when she comes into the relationship, she begins to treat that relationship with the emotion of anger because she doesn't know how to manage it when it comes up. When the things that the husband does looks like the father or the absence of the father, the anger raises its ugly head, right? And then the other one is, what happens if you haven't healed the father wound? So there are two categories. I mean, we've been mentioning it all along. The feelings of distance and anger, where you end up pushing away your partner, or you become insecure and clingy. So you see the polars there, right? So in one instance, you're antagonistic and aggressive. You know, the angry black woman, they like to tag us like that. And then the other side, you're insecure, you're weak. You're insecure and clingy. And so you want extra assurance from your partner, but that person cannot give you that enough because it's really not their role. What you are trying to fill, they cannot fill it. That's the daddy void. That's the daddy wound. And so your partner can feel that no matter how much they give you, it is never enough. We're now in the marriage and relationship, right? It is always based on insecurity. Insecure attachment that happened in the past lead to almost all of the relationship problems that adults experiences. Almost all the fights, the not great sex, the misunderstandings tend to come from unhealed issues of the past, including the daddy wound. All right?
So what do you do? You had that experience. You probably didn't have your father around, and if they were around, they were kind of still absent in many ways. They walked out or what have you. Maybe they died and as a result you don't have a daddy. Remember we said you can lose your father all kinds of different ways. Could have been prison, could have died in COVID. We have lost some dads have died. So there are many reasons. Most of them, of course, not in your control, and some of it the mother didn't have a say in. You know, they left or they died or what have you. So what do you do? How do you treat with the wound? How do you deal with the issues? One of the first things I think you have to do is just acknowledge that there is a wound, if there's a wound. So the healing starts with the acknowledgement. There is a void in me, or there is a pain in me that I have not, a longing in me that I have not fully paid attention to, and I have not addressed it.
Some comments coming. Go ahead. You can see what those are.
Developing a relationship with your Heavenly Father, forgive your earthly father. Those are really good. We're gonna touch on those. Yes. So the first thing, acknowledgement though. You cannot heal what you don't acknowledge. So if there's an issue, you don't acknowledge it, then there's no way that you're going to experience any healing. So if there's an issue, acknowledge it. And maybe you first have to talk to your Heavenly Father, right? Tell him how you feel. And just pour out yourself before God. And then I would also suggest that you just probably need to talk to a professional, a counselor. You probably need to address it in that particular way, and they will help you walk through what possibly you could do as it is, right? And Marcia also acknowledged, and we said, we believe that developing a relationship with your Heavenly Father might be the best step you take in dealing with the wound the father left. The father
and I want to say with that, that even sometimes developing a relationship with God can become difficult when you've had an absent or abusive father. Because our fathers or parents tend to be our first image of God. And so when again, that perfectionist belief I talked about, when our fathers are absent and we tend to feel, okay, I did something wrong, why daddy left, or daddy abused me in this way, we tend to feel that God is going to be punitive and God is going to be conditional as well. And so a lot of times they're in relationships with their husbands and they're trying to deal with the issue, but they're struggling to approach God about it because they see God in the way that they see their earthly father. And so that's one of the reasons I love that song, You're a Good, Good Father. That's who you are. That song always moves me because it's great to know that God is the absolute of fathers, the father of fathers. And he doesn't desert us, he doesn't conditionally love us, but he loves us unconditionally. And if you can come back to that right understanding of the fatherhood of God, then you can see how God can fill that father wound that has been left by your earthly father, right? But you have to become very real with yourself. You have to become, like I was saying, honest with yourself, and recognize that sometimes the issues that have been happening in your family are really the projection and the oozing of the wound in your soul from the father void, the fatherless void. All right. So if you're go ahead, Nevin.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So at this point, the other question I want to address, which you're asking, addressing, is that it can also become a generational issue. So you're in your relationship now, you're dealing with all this void and trauma, we call it trauma as well, from not having a father, and your children are being raised around you and are observing the way you're interacting with your spouse. And the very language that you use can communicate to your children that men are unimportant. One of the things that we've been saying that happens is that we don't know how to relate to men because we're not accustomed, but then they tend to often feel that men are not important. So you know how many young girls, think about when you're going to school, who used to say, all men are dogs? Because for them, there was no good man around because their dad was not a good dad. Or the men who were in their lives were not good fathers. All right? So definitely you want to be able to address that. Okay? Can I say something? Go ahead.
Yes. What I'll say also is, because we're dealing with the people who are facing that right now, who have faced that. What do? We said already you have to acknowledge what you're feeling. If there's a wound, acknowledge it. We say you have to lay it up before God, your father, get in a relationship with that father. The other thing is forgiveness.
Forgiveness. And I think...
And for me, that's one of the ways that the wound really starts to heal.
Yeah.
If you can bring yourself, and we hope you can, to forgive that father. And don't wait for them to say sorry either.
They probably never will.
Some may not, some have. I remember Sister Esther was sharing just on Sunday, gone there, that after her father, well, I think he struggled with alcoholism for quite a bit of their life, and you know that is all comes with all kinds of other issues. He eventually came to Christ. He eventually decided he was going to change his life, and when he came before them, he said, "Will you forgive me?" And they said, "We forgive you. We forgave you a long time ago." And he burst out crying. You know. But one of the ways you heal that wound is by forgiving the one that caused. It may not have even caused it, eh? Sometimes.
But he left. He
well, maybe they were pushed out. You see,
well,
some of these are complicated.
That's true.
They're probably not there anymore either because they made some bad decisions at the prison or what have you. So, but anyway, you have to seek. You have to forgive. You know, we don't have any more we don't have any
technical way to
technical.
say, yeah.
You just have to come to the place where there is forgiveness.
But that is actually a difficult thing. And I want to add to that as well. We have to change the narrative or the story we tell about ourselves about our fatherless situation and how it impacted us. So some of the things we tell ourselves often, just recapping them again. I am unworthy. I am stupid. I'm unlovable. Nobody will ever love me. So imagine having that mindset going into a marriage. What do you think is going to happen? When your husband questions you about something, you're going to say, oh, you don't love me. And you're like, what? I just said, don't do that. Yeah, but why you have to ask me that? Do you think I'm stupid? I used to do that. Not because of the fatherlessness, but but definitely. And so what you want to do is to make sure you begin to change that concept in your mind, the narrative in your brain, and begin to say, I've been having to do a lot with a lot of clients recently. Just say, I am enough. Oh my goodness. Listen, I want to say to every woman out there, if you're in a marriage, if you're struggling with a relationship, you're struggling with yourself, relationship with yourself,
you have that wound.
You have that wound, and you know what happens a lot of times? They have the fatherless wound, and then other people come and wound them because they don't pick good relationships, and just come be one big gush in their soul. But you are enough. And enough means that you are able to look at yourself and see what needs to be changed, if there are things that need to be changed. But you are enough. You don't have to perform to keep the husband. You don't have to. I was watching to see what you say. You don't have to be somebody else. You are enough. And then you don't have to live with the shame or the guilt of feeling that you are neglected and rejected, and feel that I am and I will be always rejected and neglected. And then you don't have to justify your need, your desire for love. It is what is for you. Right? That's what comments we can.
Naferti, I don't call her by that name, and I'm forgetting her. Latoya. Says, yes, I have forgiven him, my father. That's excellent.
Excellent.
And that is what we encourage persons to do. Mass is saying, I think often because we view our parents as only as parents and not as men and women, when we become adults, it's hard to see certain realities of their lives that may have caused the rift. Yeah, that's true. As a child, I mean, those things are not. That's not a.
No, because they're your hero. They're the. Yeah, you don't learn that, and then the interactions with our parents don't help to teach us that.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
You go back to the page you had before, where it talks about what it is that you must do. One of the things that we said that you have to do here is accept the truth about yourself as a child of God. Right? So remember, we told you one of the ways you do it, if healing happens, is by connecting with your Father. But then, after you connect with the Father, Heavenly Father, you have to accept the truth about yourself as a child of God. Accept what God says about you. Accept what He declares over you. And that will help in the healing process.
Yes. And so, now we take that into the relationship. You begin to release your spouse, your partner, from the burden of filling that void. You see, when you get free, you accept the love of God, you accept who you are the way you are, you accept that you actually do have a void. You begin to be a little bit more realistic with your expectations of your spouse. That's one. And then two, you're able to set better boundaries. So many women who have father voids end up being victims of abuse, even if they didn't have abuse in their childhood. But because so many times they don't know how to set good boundaries, they go into relationships feeling that if they set boundaries, again, when we talked about that, they'll push the person away. If I say I don't like that, I will push the person away. So we kind of break down our boundaries and just kind of like allow anything when our soul doesn't want it. And so when you accept that, you allow yourself to go back to the place where you release the spouse from the unrealistic expectations of healing you, which they can. Let me just say it again. Your spouse can never heal that father wound. I don't care if you went and picked the clone of your daddy with a different name. He's not going to fix it. He's not going to fix it. And if you don't heal it, you're going to pass it down. right? And the other thing is you're able to now set better boundaries in your relationship. So even in the relationship, you are able to say to your spouse, this is what I like or dislike. This is what affects me in a negative way or positive way. And I would like if you're able to do that. You no longer feel the need to sacrifice yourself, sacrifice your emotions, sacrifice your sense of identity just to be accepted by the spouse. So you're able to build better boundaries. All right?
Yeah.
And finally, as we've been saying, it allows you now to be able to pass the generational healing on to your children and those around you.
Yeah.
Now, we can't exhaust this topic.
Right.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so as a man, if you have a sense, maybe they have acknowledged it, that there is this void, or you know from what you have
Right.
seen, because you talk to your wife, you know that daddy wasn't around or what have you. You have to be patient.
Yes.
You have to be patient. You have to, it's tough, but you just have to be patient. In fact, marriage requires patience by everybody, But if your spouse is dealing with one of those wounds, one of those longings, then you're going to have to be patient with them as they work through some of those issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think what you could do is remind them in a loving way that, and that comes with communication too. So of course we always talk about communication, having that talk. Let's just sit down and talk about this. Reminding them in a loving way that, hey, I'm not your father. I'm actually not going to leave. Like we said, one of the things that tends to happen is that the woman can actively but unconsciously push the man away, a good spouse, because they don't want them to leave. So they do the pushing. Actually, I used to do that. I used to say that when I was younger and dating. I used to say, well, if it's one thing, I gotta leave them first because nobody leaving me. I actually said that. So I didn't have that many relationships, one, and then two, I wasn't that good at it, but I used to actually say it. I used to say, nobody going to leave me, so I will leave them first. So whatever, if I got an inclination that you're kind of behaving a kind of way, I started to just hops, bounce a different way, because I didn't want to have to feel that rejection again. So you as the spouse who is seeing this in your, the husband, seeing this in your wife, you can just say, listen, I'm not your dad. I'm not going to leave you. Well, hopefully that's the truth, right? I love you. I'm going to stick around with you. And you actively show that in how you interact with them.
And I also want to just caution those who have had fantastic fathers. You have a fantastic example. Relationship was wonderful. Just be mindful that your spouse is not your daddy. Some people run into trouble because they expect their daddy in the spouse, either for bad or for good, but sometimes for good too.
Yeah.
But that spouse is not your daddy. Don't expect your daddy, right? For the bad too. Sometimes they say, well, my daddy was like that, so you sort of expect a bad thing to happen.
Yeah,
You expect this trait. You're waiting for that hammer to fall. That too. So it's an expectations problem too.
Yes. Unrealistic. Unfair.
Maybe some of it.
Yes.
But if you didn't have a good father figure, you now have some new expectations. And you might say, well, I don't want that.
Yes.
So one of the things you probably have to do, those who are planning to get married or what have you probably need to have a talk about the expectations. Yeah. What do you expect in this marriage? Do I expect this? Do I expect that? What do you expect personally?
Yes.
Because that will help with the expectation gap.
Yes.
I call it. That is what you expect and what you get.
Actually, your reality.
The reality, the gap. And there will still be a little gap, because you never exactly get everything you expect. But the smaller the gap is, the better the transition will be.
Yes.
The better the experience will be.
Especially with
but if they expect up there and what happens is somewhere can't see my hand.
Okay, yeah.
It's somewhere
or
down
the
there.
ability to fulfill is below there.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult. But
It's going to be difficult.
let me say this quickly before the time, because we
Yeah,
have 1 minute.
1 minute.
I want to say it also to the spouse who is, the male, because we're talking about the female now. Support and assist your wife in that healing process. Support you, pray with her, pray for her, support her in therapy. You may find, or encourage her to go to therapy. You may find something on the internet that you're reading and you say, look, babes, look at this. We were talking about this the other day. What do you think about this? I think we're like, see, I was telling you this all the time. Look, they right about it. No. Support them in the journey, because what ultimately it is oftentimes unresolved grief. I put that in last because just deliberately. I want you to think about that. So oftentimes when they come to therapy, what they're dealing with is loss issues. And so think about how you would feel if you lost your parent to death now, and how you'd want people to be patient with you. Imagine that child losing losing her parent when she was a child, and still feeling that grief because she was never able to connect with why or how do I build my life now with the absence of my father. All right? Somebody's saying something.
Yes. Carol, I don't know.
Yes, we're coming to that, Carol. We're gonna come. We just wanted to deal with women for now, but that is also something with the men, and that is a whole other issue. But we are gonna talk about it the next time. The issue of fatherless boys. Yeah. This time we just touched on fatherless women. I guess that we should start with boys because it was Father's Day, but
maybe.
All right.
But it was connected to father.
Yes. Yes.
The father, and we're saying you're so important, men. And as we end, you can't imagine the impact you can have on not just your child, but on your child's child and your child's child and your child's child. Many generations. The way you operate with your children, the sort of love and attention you give them, their commitment to them, can bless generations to come. Yeah. In fact, you're impacting marriages and you don't even know it. You don't even know it. Yep. You're impacting their marriage. You're impacting their future and you don't even know it. Yeah. And that's not to criticize you. That's to tell you how important you are as a father. So just do your best. Yes. There's no perfect father, but make sure you're doing your best, because your child needs you. Yes. Not just for now, but when she gets into but for the future. Yes. She learns about dating, she learns about men, she learns about how they operate, they learn about the ego that God gave us. Okay, you learn all those things, God made us in particular ways. Y'all just pull that ego out of heaven, y'all. So God gave you a little thing and y'all just magnify it. Yeah. But we're out of time. But is the ego help us to defend our family? And fight that's the chemical in your brain. Connected in some way. Oh my. God bless you. Yes. And thanks for being on. And we appreciate that you spent some time with us. Yes. We have a few very interesting programs coming along. What's that? Jerry, I was expecting to hear you sooner, man. He said I was doing so well. Yes, I agree to you, Jerry. Maybe you have to sleep with me tonight. Yeah, careful. Pray for me. Pray for me. Yeah. We're good, man. We're good. We have interesting interactions coming up. Yeah. We're going to have a session with a couple that got married very young, and we're going to explore. We're going to explore the issues relating to getting married young. No issue. Well, that was my dream. That's your dream. Never happened. God saw better coming for you. Take care, everybody. Have a good night. Have a good night. God bless you.